Hi, it's Will from StormleyCastle.com, and this is part 8 of the Sculpting Fantasy Miniatures tutorial. And in this part we're going to put on some clothing on this guy. We're going to put his leather undergarment, his chainmail. So this is a big tutorial. A lot of people are probably looking forward to this one, and this is going to be fun. I'm going to show you how I do it as I do it. Somewhat as I do it, because it's going to take me a couple of hours to do, but I'll show you some hands-on in action kind of shots so you can see me doing it, and I'll also give you some nice tips on how I do it and how you can do it. Okay, let me show you what I've got here. I'm making the leather for underneath his chainmail, and this is what I got. I rolled out 2 pieces with a pencil, nice and thin. Get it nice and thin, as if it were clothing. And this piece is going to go around his thighs. Only a little bit shows underneath his chainmail at the very bottom on his thighs, so that's going to be that part. And this is going to go around his neck, and I've cut a hole in here using just a socket. Find something that cuts a hole that's about the right size, and I'll wrap this around his neck, and then I'll form it into shape to be his, kind of like a leather or almost like a t-shirt underneath his chainmail. Now, there's the bottom of it. Now what to do is, you don't want this line to show. You want this lower line is going to be showing, of course, because that's his clothing you'll see. But you don't want this upper line to show. So what you do is just mold this to the shape of his body. See how I'm doing that? See how it's starting to disappear, but you still can see the cloth where it's going to be seen. Okay, I've got his kilt and his underkilt there in place pretty good, and it looks pretty good. And the thing about this is later on we're going to actually add some small wrinkles to that, like clothing wrinkles, and that'll look really nice. But we won't do that until after we put the armor on, the chainmail. Now, I've used an X-Acto knife to cut his shirt around his neck like this. So let's see if we can get that on, and you may have to experiment, try different size holes and whatnot. All this is the part of his garment that shows underneath his chainmail around his neck, and the bib here in the front is a little bit longer because the chainmail has a V in it. So when we paint this miniature, this will be probably a leather color or some kind of a color different than chainmail. Only about like this will be plenty. This layer is the same material as this, but you don't have to fill the whole thing in. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's a lot of work. We're going to fill it all in with chainmail. So now you mold this to the sculpture of his body, but leave this internal ring pretty distinct so it shows that it's different from his body, it's clothing. Okay, his leather undergarments are ready and molded in nicely. You can see I've molded it in nicely here, and I've still retained some of the shape of his figure. You can see his pectoral muscles here still, his shoulders a little bit, and so the shirt is clinging to his body, so you still get a sense of his physique underneath it. Now is the step of doing chainmail, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You roll out the same way you did the leather there. You roll out thin sheets of clay or dough but of Super Sculpey, and you can either put in all the little links while it's on the figure, or you can use a technique that I like to use. I'll show you here. Is I have this material that's deeply textured on a piece of glass there. So this has got a nice pebbly texture to it, and you should try to find something like that. Sometimes even different types of paper will be textured enough to give you that effect. You can look around. Sometimes frosted glass will give you a nice effect for chainmail. So what I'll do is I'm going to roll myself out a big sheet of this, and my big piece, and roll it out nice and thin, and then when I pull it up, it'll have that nice texture on it, and it'll look like chainmail. And I can cut out various pieces and add them to his body. Now I used a wine bottle to roll that out nice and thin, and I got quite a bit out of it. It's really thin, and but the important. There we go. See it? This has got some wonderful texture here. I don't know if you can see that. A couple of important things here is this chainmail is going to have a belt on. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up pinching this. Once I trim it some more, I'm going to end up pinching it in the middle so it's gathered by a belt, so it'll be like a little bit of an hourglass. It'll come in where his belt is and then come back out. And I'm going to see here. We'll have another piece that covers his arms. There we go. There we go. Okay, you can see the chainmail is starting to take shape. I've pinched it around his waist pretty good, and I've also laid in a line here where I've depressed it, because that's where we're going to put our belt in, right across here. A nice big Viking belt. And see, this line is very defined here, where the chainmail ends and where his undergarment is. And now I'm going to do the sleeves, and I'm only going to go down to about a little past halfway on his bicep, on both arms. I wanted to say that we're doing chainmail, but if you wanted to do a metal breastplate, you do it exactly the same way, except you don't dimple the fabric. So you roll it on a piece of glass or on a countertop or something really solid. You roll it and then you mold it. And I would, with a breastplate, I wouldn't have this kind of a shape here. I'd have it more just like probably wouldn't even need an undergarment. You put it right around his neck for maximum protection. And then you would mold it slowly and carefully to his musculature. But with chainmail like this, it's a garment, so it kind of hangs, and it kind of, you see his muscular through there, the width of his hips and the bulkiness of his chest, but it does cover a lot of the musculature. Right about there is where I want it. So we wrap that around. This makes like a stitch with his, this is where it's actually stitched on real chainmail, is right here on the shoulder, so we'll stitch it right there. This can get wrapped around, but see how it still maintains the shape of his muscle? We like that. You can still see his muscles there. And this line is nice and sharply defined where the chainmail ends. So keep that nice and sharp there. There we go. Very nice. Getting there. I have to touch up that seam. Make that nice and a nice transition. I have to do the other shoulder. So I'm going to turn the camera off and work on it a bit, but you get a good sense of what's going on there.